Welcome everyone to Mongols. This is our Detroit City FC Insider episode where we take a quick look at the Hounds' next opponent, Detroit. Joining me for this one is Garret from Channel 451 Detroit. Garret, thanks for chatting with me, man. I appreciate it.
Mike, thanks for having me on. I'm glad that we're able to kind of get this on. It's funny how quick sometimes these things gather for like, hey, we got a moment, let's get a moment and talk football. I think it's also a great thing too when you look at the sense of, especially in USL, teams that are becoming closer rivals than maybe others. The fact that we're able to have people of different groups just be able to talk football as it is always a good sign.
Yeah, agree, 1,000%. And you know, that sort of segues into my first question here, and one that I always like to ask people whenever we have them on here. Just open-ended, what do you like about Detroit City this year?
I think for Detroit City, what I really like is it's a new era in a way. So for those that have seen Detroit City play before 2024, they've been used to Trevor James, coach. Talked about very similar in a lot of ways to Bob Lilly, maybe in terms of like structure and everything. We always were hardworking. We're always shape oriented. We always, I think, left a little bit to be desired attacking wise at times. And I think last year in particular was that. This year, though, Danny Dichio, hired from Sacramento Republic, who Riverhounds fans may remember as the first team coach under Mark Briggs in 2022 and 2023. And with that, Trevor James was a midfielder during his playing days. Danny Dichio was a striker. So you see kind of that adjustment and maybe that little more of aggressiveness towards a penchant for goal on some of the players we brought on. So when we are on and when we are clicking this year, we can take chances, we can be going, and we can be a little bit more creative. Um, but I know if you're cool, you're gonna. So we've talked about what I like. Now we gotta, I think, talk about the downside. What's the thing that of this team this year that I'm not liking?
Yes.
And that is when we're on, we're on. We do great. Take chances at goal. But when we're off, and I think this started to really happen, our first matchup, City Hounds matchup at Highmark, is when we get rattled in any sort of way. When we can get maybe stuck in our own heads. We have the ability to turn off in moments. We have the ability to just look flat, and and as I say, we have the ball for the sake of having the ball and not really making anything out of that. And I think that is something that we really came into effect in April. The first time I really saw that this year was our first matchup because I think the game plan, you guys came in hot off their win versus Rising, and then your tactics sucked up our midfield, and we didn't know what to do. And I think we've seen that, City fans have seen that a little bit lately. You might have seen it in a little bit for anyone that watched the Detroit City Rhode Island match on CBS yesterday afternoon. That the pieces are in there, the things are in place, and but we're sometimes in our head maybe a little bit too much.
Okay. You guys are currently in the middle of a pretty brutal stretch where, you know, I sort of saw it as 5 games in
So
2 weeks, but you said the stretch actually is a lot bigger than that. Talk a little bit about this stretch and just sort of how it's playing with the team and how you think things are going as you guys are getting into it.
the thing in particular that I'm noticing, so 5 matches in 2 weeks, but since starting the July 27th match for Sacramento Republic, going through August 31st, Detroit City will have had 9 matches, um, and 5 at home, 4 on the road. I think of that stretch, this is probably the biggest run, the most congested version of that, and that is Hartford. So Sacramento the 27th, Hartford the 31st, Rhode Island yesterday, Pittsburgh coming to Keyworth on Wednesday the 7th, and then we go out to Las Vegas on August 10th. And then 16th at Birmingham, 21st at Tampa, 24th at home versus Tulsa. So just a lot of you're playing 2-3 games a week for at least 3 weeks. And, at that point, you have to hope people are healthy. You have to hope that people are able to make adjustments and be able to ready to go. So I think a lot of our season is going to be made on this run, and even perhaps may even be really kind of a short tome based off of our matchup on Wednesday night.
Last year, you guys came into Highmark and ended our playoff dreams after we had won the Player Shield. We were riding high. That was sort of like our playoffs to run with. We also know that the Hounds are um, annually disappointed come playoff season. But at that point, many around the league, from other teams that we talked to, started to point to that as sort of an official start of a, air quotes, rivalry between Pittsburgh and Detroit. I'm not sure where I stand on that, but from your standpoint, do you guys have a, rival, and do you see Pittsburgh as being that rival?
So I think we got to look at it I think for us, Detroit City, and to give you an idea of how we feel internally, you got to kind of rewind a little bit deeper back. So Detroit City's been playing football since 2012, NPSL for 7, 8
Mhm.
years, then NISA for 2 seasons, and then USL since 2022. So um, to go long distance, to go long term, um, we've had rivals that have been more intense, very close, very regional, bad, banter, all that. Like, this is, you pencil it in, like, I want to wreck these souls up. And of those, in particular, that I would see, because I've been going to games regularly since 2017. So for me, I think the locals are the top, like your AFC Ann Arbors, the old FC Grand Rapids, which is now Midwest United. Those rivalries we can still have on the women's side for USLW League. And I think you're joining W League next year, whether that means you're in our division or if you're playing more regionally on like the Pennsylvania, Ohio side. We'll see. But those rivalries in there, Michigan Stars, if you know that name from, U.S. Open Cup and, being in NISA and around and whatever, their ownership likes to throw in a notepad worth of, stuff on Twitter or something along those lines. And, we had a short but intense rivalry with New York Cosmos, the B side of New York Cosmos, that is, before they've kind of folded things up with Rocco Commissaro now taking mainly ownership of
Mhm.
Florentina. But now, so I've given you the backstory pre USL, and those rivalries are still going to be holding up high. Going to be like, it's going to take a lot to get to. But now let's go micro now into USL.
Mhm.
I think when it comes to our USL rivals, I go Pittsburgh top. I think there is, regional. I think it's that, and Indy is the closest trip. And I also think too that our fan bases are maybe meant to be antagonists to each other. And maybe that has to do with Detroit, Pittsburgh. Maybe that has to do with Red Wings, Penguins over the years. Maybe it has to do with, regional. You want your team to be the best, and I think it is. If I were to rank the rivals of who the teams that I want to like, the supporter side of me come out that I want to see in here is like, all right, I want to be Pittsburgh. I would say Louisville, although Indy 11 lately this year with all their stuff and developments, is kind of like starting to finally get out of that. Oh, you're okay, or a rival. Like, okay, I'll put you just underneath Louisville. Um, but I think Pittsburgh is there for that reason. And I think when you talk about the playoffs last year, I mean, I'm going to be completely honest with you. We went into that game. I thought you guys were going to end our season the weekend before. I was like, this team. I was kind of lamenting it, like this team. It was like, those teams that you had, your teams, like, you get into the playoffs on the last day, but you don't feel like you deserve it. So, like, in fact, it's actually, I don't know how many Riverhounds fans know this, but it was a former Riverhound player and Russell Cicerone getting the goal against Miami in the night game that meant we got into the playoffs to then high mark a week later. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think in that moment, there's that. I think it's a top thing for USL, but it's not our top thing right now, not at the moment in there, just due to prior histories. But I think I think there's a lot of potential in that too. And the fun thing is we've beat you guys in playoffs, but we haven't beaten you in regular season. You've had the two wins, and every others have been draws. So that's something I think on a competitive side that I'd really like to see change. But we have to do the work in order for that to be done.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that especially from a USL perspective, I think you sort of alluded to it. I think they want to push teams into rivalries. And for a while, I think especially Hounds fans, they will tell you that our biggest rival for the longest time was Harrisburg City Islanders until they folded. So we had sort of that animosity of every one of those games was a road trip. And it's similar to what you had described with some of the other teams before you guys got into the USL. So I think whatever happens, it's just going to take time. But I do think that, the proximity to each other makes it interesting. But that said,
Yeah,
you did also mention Indy sort of being in your circle of regionality as well that could play into that too. So just curious because I think that everybody sort of talks about it from their side. So I was just curious how you guys sort of look at things.
I will say also too. Let's see where W League goes. Let's see where the divisions go with W League
Yeah.
because, like our first year in W League, after for the women's side, we had Indy in the Valley, and Indy was real. We didn't play them last year, but then we have our best women's season ever, and we beat Indy in the Central Conference. So to like say, hey, you knocked us out of Open Cup, but look what we just did here, because they have an incredibly talented women's side. They have a lot of great resources that they put to that, and the talent pool is very, very good. So I want to see where Riverhounds in W League is come 25. Are you in our division? Is there a chance that if we go here, we're in the conference? Because then that means that's two more games. And I'll tell you what, for those, as to give you a tease of what I think W League are for Riverhounds fans, those games, that 2 month stretch of the season in Women's W League gives me a feel for the old City and PSL summer season days of the men when you had those quick battles, those intense things, your Rust Belt rivalries, all those things. But with the Women's League and the W League, the football is that much better. So that's, I
Yeah.
think, like, take a
Yeah.
look and see where you're going to be placed in come December or January when that schedule comes out. And I think that'll bump the rivalry up too.
Agreed. Agreed. Definitely looking forward to seeing where we're dropped. At this point, the front office hasn't given us anything, but we're holding out. We'll see how it comes up. You mentioned sort of Twitter and indie and things like that. As through this show, we end up talking to a lot of fans all over the league, and anytime Detroit fans come up in conversation, there seems to be sort of this collective groan, and you're sort of smiling at that. Do you see that as something that you all wear as like a badge of honor, or is that a stigma that you think needs to change? Just sort of this outside perception of the fan base.
I think it is. If you look at the header, our main supporters base for Detroit City, Northern Guard supporters, it's almost like they live on that the tagline America's most hated supporter group. It's almost like it's like you're leaning in. Any pro wrestling fans checking this out, there's your good guys, which are your faces, and then your bad guys, which are your heels. And I also believe in that sense. For me, characters are, and sometimes you are over the in a way you are yourselves, but you may be the various levels over the top or under letting in there. So my thing is this is a passion, and you guys know this from your supporter base, and that people that are involved in the supporters realm of clubs are very passionate people. They have ideals, they stick to them, and everything like that. They're true to themselves. So while they're free, and while whether it's majority of or supporters or new city fans or anything like that, they speak their mind. And look, we're human beings. We're not going to always agree with each other or anything like that. But what people are saying is they're honest, and at the end of the day, like it's like you may not like it, you ain't in there, but it's like, hey, they're being there, we'll go for it. And I think you kind of thrive on that, and it's almost that moments of like, If you've seen Twitter lately, when we win, especially locals, we revel it in. But when we're miserable and when we're going well, oh, it's not like we just hide back the polar bear emoji reactions after a 1-1 draw to Rhode Island in a stoppage time on national television or losing to Hartford, and you see people like they just lost a loved one. I think that's just like, they know, they speak how they feel. And, I get, if people like it, cool. If they don't, say la vie.
Listen, I'd rather a passionate fan base than one that doesn't show up. And, before you guys in the
Right.
USL, it was Indy. And before it was Indy, it was Cincy. And it just seems like someone's always there to kind of pick up the flag. But I think, especially because of your history and sort of what everyone knows about how passionate you guys are about this team from way back before the USL days, I think I'm happy to a certain
Mm-hmm.
extent to see that continue. And just,
Yeah.
I guess good for you guys, and if everybody else wants to sort of hate on it or whatever, that's on them. But you guys sort of be true to yourself and like kudos to you. I'm cool with that.
Yeah. And I think that's, you got to have that little bit of you got to have that little bit of banter and that bad blood. Like the club's made, I think, for people that don't understand it, or when they see you, like, and there's a lot of things that you might have seen lately, people being frustrated about with this national telecast that we had, and some people might be like, why are people being upset about this when this is your moment of exposure? It is in those moments, in those times, and some of those things. And I'm not going to go into all of that. People have the ability and the resources to check out, like, the instances, reporting, not even just Detroit City and Northern Guard supporters, but even like people that are known that are covering for USL, like Kaylor Hodges over for like USL show and Birmingham Legion talking about it, and other people. The point being is that, yes, this exposure is great for the club. This matches is great for the club on there, but it almost is, the atmosphere and the people that make the noise is kind of what sells people on this club, or what tunes neutrals into watching this club. So when something from outside influence comes in that wants to water that down, people are going to be pissed off. And I think they're in their well mind to explain what happens in all that form. So some people outside here may not understand it, but you gotta, like, put yourself in, if you were in your own shoes and you were so long seeing something grow while change, how would you react? And I think that's like what I'll kind of go into that point on there.
Yeah. How do you think things play out on Wednesday night?
um I'm kind of been on the, I'm going to attribute this to my feeling lately for a couple of days. Detroit sports fan won. So all the teams in here. When our most successful team right now is the Detroit Lions, which, while I'm incredibly happy for right now, when that's happened, it's a weird time. But then also when international football, I'm a Crystal Palace supporter. Love Eintracht Frankfurt. Two teams in Germany. So all we know, football teaches you pain. And unfortunately, lately for Detroit City on the men's side, we have essentially experienced pain lately. Before our first meeting on April 27th, Detroit City won their first 5 matchups, 15 points collected. We're rolling, we're feeling good. Perhaps maybe came in the high mark a little too heavy, full balloon pressure, everything, especially remember what happened, and then we got rocked back down to earth. The last 15 games played, Detroit City has collected a grand total of 14 points, which, as you can tell, is one less than our first 5 games altogether. In the last 5 matchups at home, Detroit City have conceded goals in each of those matches after the 80th minute. 2 against Birmingham Legion, 1 against Tampa Bay Rowdies, 1 against Memphis, 1 against Sacramento, and yesterday against Rhode Island. Of those goals in those 5 games, that's caused us to drop a total of 9 points. As you can see in the Eastern Conference standings, that's the difference between now being in 7th place with Loudoun's win over Miami yesterday, and maybe taking out Indy for the last home spot. So now you have the situation now there coming in of a Riverhounds team that's coming in a rivalry game, on a game that'll be on CBS SN. So it is something that will have a little bit maybe more generalized access for people to see that have that coverage. And you're playing, and you're coming off a big win that you guys had in Sacramento. You're coming off a good run of form that you've had since the setback at Monterey Bay last month. Like you beat Roots 5-0, and then you're rolling in. You beat Sacramento. Your defense is staying consistent. Um, I have some cause for concern because it seems like I want to ask you in particular because it's been you had an off season that probably frustrated the hell out of you guys. Ordonia's going, Ibarra going, the Rhode Island Albert Dequa going. So you lost a lot of that talent that made you guys top of the Eastern Conference, best record in the regular season. You still have some key pieces in place. You have Eduardo Kiza there. You still got Kennardo Forbes. Robbie Mertz, who some people may know because he played his college ball at Michigan. So to kind of give you in there, I've seen what I've seen with like Kiza and Sterling in there that seem to be developing and clicking and causing enough havoc. But what would you say maybe something that's a little bit different of this Riverhound side attacking wise that people that have been so used to seeing the team in 22 and 23 might be in for a shock for?
It's interesting because, as you mentioned, we did lose a bunch of key pieces in the off season. But one of the things that the team liked to tout was that we actually kept the most players that Lily has ever kept over the offseason. The issue that we learned early on was that those key pieces of the Albert Dequas up
Yeah.
top, player of the year in the USL, lose him up top, and then you have Ordonez, who was defender of the year, you lose him, you lose those key pieces, and things start to fall apart a little bit. So our biggest trouble really has been scoring. There was sort of an 8-game stretch prior to really the last 4 games where we had only scored 1 goal over the course of those 8 games. And so clearly, with the guys were in their own heads. I had talked to a number of the players, and you could tell tactically they felt they were doing the right things. The ball just wasn't going in. And so I think what's been sort of a difference, you mentioned the game against Oakland where we scored 5 goals, then we got 3 goals, and now it's been 1 goal and 1 goal in the past 2 games. I want to make sure that the team sort of keeps reminding themselves that they can score. But last year, most of those goals came off the foot of somebody like Albert Dequa. This year, it's being distributed around to a bunch of people, and you really never know what's going to happen. So the attack is going to be less of a quick counter attack, and you have a Dequa that can finish a goal, and you're going to have much more of, I think, what Lily prefers, more sustained play where you have guys getting wide down the wings and they're trying to cross balls in, and you hopefully have guys rushing and trying to make plays in the box. And so that's going to be the big difference between what you've seen the previous 2 years of us and what you're seeing this year. I think defensively, I think the midfield, they're all sort of stout and doing what they need to do. It's just the biggest question is can we finish? So that's the big question mark for me,
Right.
especially heading into Wednesday after we go to the West Coast, play Sacramento, we have to come back, and now we're traveling to Detroit. Hopefully the guys are rested and can put in a full shift. Um, in Detroit on Wednesday night.
Yeah. And I also think too, when you look at for the tactical battle, because we often even joke it's like the lily ball and like tactics and you changes. You could have many different shapes from the context of one match. I
Mm-hmm.
think when you look at City's perspective in the first match of the year, they started off in like that 4-2-3-1. That could go into like a 4-4-2 off the ball. That can go into like your two holding and then your three and up top, and you can make it a front four. Um, we know you guys love like a 3-5-2, 5-3-2 variation, depending in there. You like I said, the wing backs having central, having structure, making sure your goals conceded are as minimal as they can be, and then get your goals how you get them. lately the last couple of matches in their city seems like they'll go into a four, sometimes a 4-4-2, but then they've also seemed to really want to go wing backs as well. Three center backs, 3-5-2, 3-4-3, essentially, those type of varieties. So I'm wondering, based off of what we saw yesterday with Rhode Island, which it seemed like it was both teams trying to battle each other with a back three, especially with the way Rhode Island's been playing lately with their wing backs and Dequan Williams connecting now. Are we going to see a shape for shape matchup between, like with what Bob Lilly is going to roll out and what Danny Dico is going to cower? I can see that being more of a potential than us trying to play that 4-2-3-1 and then getting soaked up because of all that pressure you guys did centrally in that first matchup.
Mhm.
So the question is now is are we going to be the ones that are still going to be in our own heads? Because it seems like Ben Moore's got a goal, which is nice, but if you kind of see like the move up and the build up's great, but then something's missing. They're not thinking. The ball's going through the legs when you're trying to take a touch. You're maybe a second too long in your build up, and by that time somebody else comes and fills the space. You're off by this much on your ball in the box. You take a touch rather than one. Those little things all add up in the course of a match, especially when you're attacking in somebody else's final third. And I think that's the thing that's been bogging us down recently. And if you do that against a team that loves to just, you know, shut it down, like I think Riverhounds and Lilyball can when they have a chance to get something, it could be difficult. So I think and I'm also curious to see how much rotation we're going to do. Who's we know there's this team will likely this team likes to rotate a lot more. If you've seen the Trevor James teams, his guys were his guys. Didn't matter if you had a 3-day break or 3-7. He likes you guys unless you're doing something really really great to warrant coming into the lineup. The 11's the 11. This time somebody might come out here. A couple people might go out there. We made 6 changes between the Birmingham game and Miami. That was a Wednesday, Saturday in June. So I can see us making some rotations. A couple of our guys had childbirth, had significant others give birth to children last week. Stephen Carroll, Brent Levi's. So that means like Levi's was back in the lineup. I think Stevens was just either the night before the match or just before. So you got those varying factors in there too. So I think it'll be very, very interesting. And also look out for Elvis Samo because he came off a rough injury. He seems like he's trying to click. I think had he gotten that goal in the first couple minutes of the game yesterday, I think he'd be like fully rolling. But it's like that when you're not getting goals, you start trying too hard. And the worst thing you can sometimes do is try too hard. We're hockey fans. Sometimes people grip the stick too much, or
Yep.
sometimes just sometimes you got to like simplify your game rather than trying to do too much.
Agreed. 1,000%. Give me a score prediction here.
So I'm gonna do what I did when I was on Tide Talk last week with Matt. Um, I did a 1-1 draw, and the reason why I did a 1-1 draw with Tide Talk is because the first time I did 1-1 draw in June, we wound up winning 2-0. Tried to manifest that again, it didn't happen because City defended in post 80th minute. Um, you're the better side coming in. The run of form that you've had after July 6th is favoring. This is a 6 point matchup. Um, you win, you're within 1 point. You've got played I think 2 more games than us. If memory serves me correctly right now, without looking at FOTMob or SofaScore or anything. We win. We got a point gap. We can pad our thing in there, got a couple of games in hand, and you kind of, I don't say you have to start from scratch, but you need to then go after like North Carolina or hope Rhode Island
Mhm.
slips up. If we lose, that means we still haven't won at home in the league since Charleston on June 15th. And then we haven't won since Miami on June 29th. And then we got to go to Las Vegas on Saturday, August 10th, which let's be honest, this isn't the Las Vegas Lights teams that we can make fun of for all these years because they in there. Joey Batista, Jose Batista, Joey Bats has got that place running like a professional organization, and they're playing good football. I do not like to go to the desert on a Saturday night after playing you guys on a Wednesday, but I don't make the schedule. Um, I want three. I don't think we're going to get three, so I'll go 1-1. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's a good shout. I mean, for all of the, how the teams have performed up to this point, even the fact that you guys are in the middle of sort of this really tough stretch, these games are always just sort of hard nose, you know, you get in and you just sort of smack each other around. So I don't put a ton of stock in sort of how we've done, basically over the past month. I think whatever happens, especially the fact that this is in Detroit, I think it's going to be a battle, and I think that I would love the points. We talked about last week how if we could flip things around, we would almost take the draw at Sacramento and take the win against Detroit just from what it means in the Eastern Conference standings. I just don't think it's going to be that simple. It never is. So I think that if we go in and we're able to at least get a point and, sort of keep the race going to get us into the playoffs, I think I'll be okay with that. So I think a 1-1 draw. I'll say that as well, hoping for three, but I'll be happy with 1-1, especially considering that it's Detroit. So
Right. Who do you have? What's your next run of games that you have after us on Wednesday?
So after you guys, we have San Antonio at home, and then I think we have Vegas at home after that. It's two West Coast teams back to back. So I'd love to get into a string here of battling Eastern teams to try to get more of those 6 point swings. But at least in the short term, that's just not the case. So the Hounds really have to get points where they can. Um,
I was going to say our run of five after you guys for those is so we got to go to Las Vegas on Saturday the 10th. Then we are on the road at Birmingham on Friday, August 16th, and then on the road in Tampa Wednesday, August 21st. Before we end August with two home matches, Tulsa on the 24th, Hartford on the 31st. But I mean, for those that we were looking at, like, oh, Tulsa's rough, Hartford's rough. Hartford, we just lost to Hartford. Yeah, we lost 1-0, but Brandon Burke's getting that team starting to click. They got
mm-hmm.
some speedsters. They got pace up top. I know you guys just faced them recently, so you'll know kind of what I'm talking about. They can present a tactical issue on there. The Rowdies are tough. Rowdies are still physical, still a pain to play. Legion, I'm bothered because that was the first time we lost to Legion, and people gave me crap. Some of our Florida people gave me crap because I popped on hammering down um, earlier, and we're like, yeah, let's see how it goes. It's like on this thing, and then we give up 2 goals after the 80th minute when they're winning position. So it's like really, Sabo. I think it's a difficult run. It really is, and I think the thing is, your guys are getting in the rhythm at the right time. We're trying to find our rhythm, and I know there's other teams that are still like Hartford's trying to make all that ground from how rough they started. Loudoun's getting going. Is North Carolina got enough to get going together now? Because North Carolina, like you guys, also a very physical team, but weren't able to get the results. Like I think them dropping 2 points to us 3 weeks ago is massive in the standings right now. You wouldn't think of it on July 16th when that match happens, but now it's like those 2 points are 1 point to us, 2 points dropped by them. It makes that table as of the time we're talking right now a completely different ballgame.
Yeah,
So you got a good run of games coming up. It looks like on paper, but you got to put it on actually on the pitch and see what you can get.
agreed. Garrett, I really appreciate the time. Tell everyone where they can find you online.
All right, so personal Twitter, Instagram, even Discord at GM Comats. You'll find anything from me talking randomly football to guitar stuff and especially pro wrestling because I love that stuff. 451 DET for anyone that wants to check out the short city centric content that is a mix of sports and definitely some entertainment and banter. At 451 DET on Twitter, and then you can find us 451 channel 451 on anywhere you check out podcasts. We have our YouTube channel at 451 Detroit also too. So those are our full on episodes, which we call Tunnel Talk, our Molding Over City, which is just be doing video shorts. on anything or special occasions, as well as our YouTube live stuff, which we started to do, which is throw in series. Additionally, we do some Detroit City stuff as part of the Majors Detroit, which 451 is a part of. That is just a kind of an in Detroit independent thing covering all teams in the city. On there, that's Twitter at TM. I hate that. I'm always made this difficult. At TMSNX Detroit. YouTube channel at the Majors TV. We're actually dropping something at the end of this week after the Riverhounds match. So that is our Make City Make Spence content. Myself, Adam Hernandez, he's also a part of Channel 451. And some people may know Sean Spence's writing Words About Shapes on Patreon. So we have a couple different ways that people can check out content on there too. I know Detroit Pittsburgh stuff. If you're also hockey fans, I think we opened the season against the Pens October 10th. So I feel like we have plenty of reasons to get some good Detroit Pittsburgh fans going up these next few months.
Agreed. As I said, man, I really appreciate the time. Thank you, and thanks everyone for watching and listening. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're enjoying this, and we will be back with more Hounds content very, very soon.